Shaking AC.
Well, we're here for part two
Welcome
of
back to this riveting conversation about budget.
yeah, and I know, here we are a whole week later, and no, I'm kidding. I'm actually like we're really just recording this right after the first part because we were just getting so into it. So let's go.
Okay, let's go. Where were we?
Okay. So we were talking about the kind of the concept of like unallocated budget or slush fund or whatever, and that I think, people the reality is a lot of especially depends on the stage of the brand, but a lot of brands they can't even make that happen because there's so much going on and they can't figure that out. But yeah, it looks like you want to say something.
Yeah, there's this incredible book called Parkinson's Law by Cecil Parkinson. It's sort of like Murphy's Law or, any of those like sort of fake laws. But it's a comedic book, and the premise of it
Okay.
is basically work will expand to fit the time allotted to it. That oftentimes what happens with money as well, right? Your expenses will expand to fit the amount of money that you have, right? So what's happening to a lot of people is that they have whatever $1,000, let's make it more realistic, $50,000 a month, and they're going to allocate it to a whole bunch of expenses, and then they're surprised as to why they don't have money at the end of the month. When a lot of these expenses are unnecessary or could be cut back, or maybe you adjust the business model, all that sort of stuff. And the premise behind this Profit First book, which it not only applies to business,
Wait,
but
you said profit first, but you said a different title of the book before. Which one?
all right. So the first book I talked about was Parkinson's Law by Cecil Parkinson, right?
Okay.
But resuming from what we were speaking about last episode, where I was talking about Profit First,
Okay.
rather than having a bunch of money and letting your expenses expand to the point where you use up all that money, first put the saving aside. Put the saving aside for like a profit payout for yourself, then put the saving aside for savings, like in terms of emergencies, and then start working on your expenses. And what actually happens then, especially if you take that money and throw it into a bank account in a separate bank, like a totally different national bank that maybe requires two or three people to sign because you're only removing it once or twice a year to pay taxes or something like that, you're forced to create a business model that works around a more restrictive expense structure. And you'd be surprised how you will decrease that expanded expense, just like work expands to fixed time in Parkinson's law.
Interesting. I didn't expect to go there.
Okay.
But I hear you. Okay. Something else that we were talking about is um, just again the involvement of the different team members when it comes to the budgeting process and who's involved and who's chiming in. And so it depends again on the size of the company. So the further along they are, the more you can predict and say like, okay, this department gets this amount, this department gets this amount. Actually, I'm going to pause right there and ask you, or not pause, but ask your thoughts on what do you think about like as an earlier stage franchise company when you don't have 600 locations and a lot of history to bank on and all that. Do you still think it makes sense to have department budgets, or do you think you just group it more together?
Well, I mean, first one correction here is we've been in franchising for the better part of a decade, and we have much experience and many wisdom in anything that could go wrong or could go right. We just consider ourselves re-emerging because these damn pandemic lockdowns just obliterated us. Anyways, so I don't think it makes sense to have departmental budgets. Oh, sorry. I think it makes sense to have departmental budgets, but not necessarily other people tackling them. Like you should have a budget for marketing. You should have a budget for, equipment upgrades because that needs to happen. But when you've got too many cooks in the kitchen, it starts to get way too complicated, right? So when you're a small company, you don't have that many cooks in the kitchen. There's a lot of people wearing the same hat. So you just put it into these buckets and you yourself or amongst your team, you start allocating that money in respect to that particular prerogative.
It was definitely interesting to see on our Operations Foundations roundtable, which has brands that have 100 or less franchises operating versus the operations leadership that has over 100, but a lot of them there have two, three, 400. Um, there's just a difference where you're not flying by the seat of your pants as much. The amount of engagement on like, well, there's a good engagement on both roundtables, but the amount of it was more like people were more able to share what they actually do versus like trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like on that one. And so I think my point with that is I think my takeaway is that it never hurts to start, thinking like you should definitely be budgeting, but it never hurts to start thinking about where you're going with your budgeting as you're going to grow, but not feeling like you have to have it perfect,
Yeah.
at that early, like you have to accept that there's going to be a lot of unknowns.
Sure, and I mean, I'm teetering on this fence between doing things prudently and doing things efficiently, right? Like you've got to be able to have both factors in there, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm a person who doesn't want to bring more people into the fold. Like hiring should be a last resort because it increases complexity, right? So a lot of big companies, when they have a new employee, the boss will come over and be like, "Hello, Ms. Angela. Welcome to the company. Here's your training material. Take 2 weeks to review this. Then we'll go into a meeting to make sure you understand everything and blah, 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 blah." Whereas when you go to a more efficient company, they'll be like, "Awesome. Glad you joined us. This is a project. Figure out how to do it. I need it at the end of the week." You know? And so you don't have to sacrifice prudence in order to do something, but you also shouldn't be sacrificing efficiency. If there's way too many moving knobs, you have to have discussions about this sort of stuff and get 6 different approvals. That slows down the natural beast of what a business is. It wants to deploy its capital and its money and say, "Go forward, be fruitful, and multiply."
Okay. So that was a little kind of rant coming out of you there. And one other area that we went was, this probably sounds pretty obvious, but the two main sources of revenue in a franchise company, right? Like franchise development, friend dev, new franchisees, cost like, or getting, franchise fees in, like the sales, all that. Which really is more when you get a little further along, because in the earlier days, it always is like the cost is more than the franchise fee, right? But anyway, so that side, and then the side of like the franchisee performance and what's actually happening on this side. So we talked a lot about like the different departments are all kind of being fed by those two revenue sources in a company. So there was a bit of a debate about like whether a department is an expense, but or is it just doesn't have its own revenue stream, so it's like operations. Well, that really to me falls under the franchisee performance side, right? But then what about something like an HR department or a you know, the legal department. Like those, they're not revenue generating, but they're
Mhm.
still important to the function of the business. And then we also got into the cost of growth, like how you can trying to anticipate growth, how much it costs, especially a newer brand that's under 100 locations, to go from like, okay, yeah, we can project, we want to sell 10 franchises and get them open, but how much does it cost to get them to a point where they're actually making the franchise or money? So that was interesting. Thoughts?
What did you learn?
Well, we didn't figure out the cost
Oh,
because that's the $1 million question. I mean, do you want to do it right? I mean, obviously, I would promote that you need to get some professional development for your field teams. You need to put the right infrastructure in place, all that, the right framework in place. So we just talked about that being something to try to figure out on a brand. You'd have to figure it out on your own brand based on your own costs and things that you have. Yeah, I'm more just sharing key takeaways, things that were discussed. But
mhm.
yeah, what are your
I mean,
thoughts on that revenue streams?
there's a very stark difference between direct ROI and indirect ROI. And different
Mhm.
departments earn direct ROI, and some of them earn
Yeah.
indirect ROI, and some of them are just compliance requirements, like a legal
Yes.
department. So at that
Exactly.
point, you start outsourcing to something that can be fractional, right? Whereas if they're doing
Not if they're a bigger brand, though. Like
yeah,
a bigger brand's going to have in-house.
yeah, they'll have in-house counsel, but presumably that in-house counsel has enough work to consume their time. If they don't, then I'm
Right.
calling you out right now. You're being inefficient. Get somebody
Yeah.
fractional. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for emerging brands and things. Yeah. Yeah. So just overall interesting to hear the different ways people are doing things. And I think we sparked some ideas for people, which is always
I
fun.
love talking about money.
Yeah. Especially when there is money, it's even more fun.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, let's.
Wrap it up. Okay.
Yes.
3, 2, 1. Go
Go
be
be
awesome.